Greetings, Earthlings. It's been a long time since I've uploaded anything, and I wasn't really even planning on doing it, but I kind of got a few things I want to say and get off my chest and stuff, and I guess I can put it out there for anyone to hear rather than just boring my wife with the details. Now, bless my wife, she'll listen to what I have to say, but she doesn't care as much as I do, and she doesn't know as much as I do about it. Although she is getting better, very proud of her for that, because she's starting to know a little bit more about her football since we've been together. But anyway, I won't bore her with these details because she knows what I'm going to say because she's heard it all year anyway. But today, obviously, you can tell by the thumbnail and the picture and everything, we're going to talk about the Pittsburgh Steelers. And boy, howdy, where do we begin? Now, usually, there was a time where I would just be royally pissed off and just but I'm not really. This team doesn't really piss me off anymore because this is the expectation I have of this team. I quit smoking the hopium, as the kids say, a few years ago, and it's really been beneficial to me, greatly to my mental health and my physical health. I'm trying to get my dad to kind of adopt this too, because he still gets a little frustrated. And he's one of the believers who thinks this team is actually better than, they appear on TV, which, let's be honest, they're not. They're a mediocre, middle of the pack football team. If it wasn't for them adding that 7th playoff spot a few years ago, they would hardly ever make the playoffs. Part of me is wondering if they did that just to make Mike Tomlin happy, because for some reason, everyone just loves Mike Tomlin. I don't understand where the love and stuff that all these people have of him. Now, personally, I don't have a problem with Mike Tomlin. I don't know the man, and could be a nice guy in real life. I mean, he's full of shit. Obviously, you can tell anyone could hear him talking. Hard Knocks didn't do him any favors either. I'll tell you that right now in terms of his lame ass cliches and his used car salesman approach to every damn thing, and he's just. Now, and that part of me is wondering if that's the reason why Pittsburgh did not really want to ever be on Hard Knocks, because I don't know if it's ever been officially said that they've been offered spots on Hard Knocks, but I can't. That show's been on, 20 years or something like that? I can't believe for a second that they have not been approached at least once about being on that team. I mean, if you're crying out loud, they've had teams like the Rams, the Browns, Detroit twice, the Jets, Atlanta. You're telling me they didn't go to Pittsburgh and try to get on there, but I'm thinking that they didn't really want to be exposed to all those cameras and all these people, because a lot more people during Hard Knocks have really had their eyes open to just how full of shit Mike Tomlin is, and how he says he never stops talking, but he says absolutely nothing. And it's really, for me, it got old for me about 10 years ago, and it's starting to get a lot older for a lot of people, and we're going to get into some of that stuff. Just like I said, you know me, I like to rant on stuff, and that's what I'm doing here. It's kind of just ranting about what I feel and what I see. But boy, oh boy, this team is just bad. I mean, it finished the game on a 5-game losing streak, and I knew they were going to lose. Those 3 games in 10, 11 days? I mean, that was a murderer's row schedule, but, Philly, Kansas City, and Baltimore, all at once like that. I knew we were going to lose all them games. I didn't expect us to lose to Cincinnati in the last week of the season at first, but once we lost those 3 and I saw how this team had basically quit and just been coasting into the playoffs, I knew that we were going to lose that game too. I mean, this team had, in their minds, had nothing to play for, even though they had the division title and everything, but the last few years, this team seems content with getting to that 9th win, getting Tomlin his non-losing record, and then they just kind of they take their foot off the gas, so to speak. I mean, they were 10-3 in the driver's seat to get a division title and host a playoff game, which they would have lost either way. It doesn't matter, because they probably would have still ended up getting steamrolled by Baltimore. And let's say Pittsburgh did not want any of that smoke. We'll get to that in a minute. But then they just started they just quit. They quit. This team quit. They were 10-3, went into play, the Eagles, and they got trounced in that game, which just to be expected. The Eagles are a better football team than us. But then we ended up clinching a playoff spot because of other things that happened. And I knew it was like, we're screwed. We're done. This is it. They're just gonna coast into the playoffs. Tomlin's got his winning season, which you can't tell me any different. I do believe that that's the most important thing for the Steelers organization as a whole and all the Tomlin supporters around there. That's the only thing you have to cling to. And I always talk about, you know how many teams would like to have 9, 10 wins every year? Chicago would kill for that. Well, you know what, Chicago? Let us just trade rape you again for a bunch of draft picks and take Tomlin off your hands and see how many games you actually win. Get to that in a minute, too. But this team is just flat out quit. That's all there is to it. They just quit, man. They're not that good. The quarterback position is an absolute shambles, and it's just, like I said, we're going to get into it right now. What's wrong with this team? There's so many things fundamentally wrong with this team. It's not just one particular thing. But the biggest issue with this team is coaching. Outside of Smith, our special teams coordinator, there's not one competent coach on this team. The offensive line coach doesn't know what he's doing. Terrell Austin, the defensive coordinator, doesn't know what he's doing. Arthur Smith is just a clown-ass yes man to Mike Tomlin. And by the way, Arthur Smith, him replacing Matt Canada this year, in my opinion, this offense has actually been worse this year than it was under Canada. So we might owe Matt Canada a little bit of an apology. Just saying. Of course, like I said, we brought in Arthur Smith rather than one of these young, innovative minds who might be able to get this offense out of the 1980s. But that's not what Tomlin wants. Tomlin wants yes men to run the system how he wants it. See, these boring-ass close games where we rely on Chris Boswell to kick 14 field goals and we win on some kind of bullshit at the end, that's how Tomlin wants it. That's how Tomlin coaches. That's what he wants. He would rather win a game 16-14 on a last-minute field goal thanks to a pass interference penalty on their defense that got us into field goal range and just do that. He would rather have a game like that than to win one 35-7 in an absolute rout where we're just dominant. He would rather have that. And I don't care what anyone says, that's the truth. And you'll never convince me otherwise. That's a problem. And Tomlin is at the root of all these problems. Like I said, the quarterback position has been in shambles for a long time. Tomlin really should have left when Ben Roethlisberger left, because when Ben Roethlisberger left, then you signed Mitchell Trubisky, which I actually thought that was a good signing at first. I kind of thought he would be able to run Matt Canada's offense and really kind of resurrect his career, but I was wrong about that. And there's a video on my YouTube from back in the day about how I was so excited about that. There's also a video how I wasn't too excited about the Kenny Pickett issue, because I knew Kenny Pickett was not a very good quarterback, but of course the Steeler faithful wanted the hometown boy from New Jersey to be our savior, and you realize he wasn't very good. And he wasn't very good in college. Kenny Pickett was not the right choice. He didn't deserve to be a first-round pick. As it turned out, really no one in that draft did. Did anyone in that draft ever do anything? I don't think so, but hell, what do I know? I wanted Desmond Ridder. I wanted them to draft Desmond Ridder. What do I know about anything? But it didn't work. And this team and coaching staff is not really set up for any quarterback to prosper. Like when we brought in Justin Fields and Russell Wilson this year, I was excited because I thought Russell Wilson, was a guy with something left in the tank and a chip on his shoulder. That was going to be a dangerous combination. Of course, then he got quote-unquote hurt, which I don't believe he was hurt. I think that was just a thing that they kind of set up and held him out so they could see what Justin Fields has. And then after we were 4-2, they switched to Russell Wilson, which I think was the right choice. Russell Wilson is the better quarterback. than Justin Fields. He just is. Justin Fields is a good runner and has a good arm, but he is horribly inaccurate. And some of those beautiful touchdown passes that Russell threw this year, there's no way Justin Fields hits any of those. So I think they made the right decision in starting Russell Wilson, who had his moments, but he didn't do himself any favors, because the problem with Russell Wilson is, since day one really with Russ, is he is not good throwing over the middle. In between the hashes, he can't really read the defenses very well in there, and he can't really hit that. I mean, every now and then, yeah, he can hit a guy on the seam. We saw that with a couple passes for Freiermuth and a couple passes to Calvin Austin, who, by the way, I'm really impressed with Calvin Austin this last half of the season. Now that he got an opportunity to catch some passes, he's got some good hands, and he is not afraid to go across the middle and take a hit. That's a dude we need to keep, obviously. But the thing about Russ was he was never good at that, but even in his prime, when he was one of the top quarterbacks in the league, he could get away with that because he had really good mobility to be able to, stretch the play out, move around in the pocket, and then someone's going to get open deep, and he was just going to heave the ball and then right into the receiver's hands for a big play. Did that a lot. And the problem is, at 36 years old, and while Russell Wilson still has decent mobility especially for a quarterback his age, he's not what he once was in the mobility department. And let's face it, he was never Lamar Jackson to begin with. But the problem is, he thinks he can still extend those plays, and he's a half second or so slower than he used to be, and that's usually getting him caught. And of course, he always had this bad habit of holding on to the ball too much. So Russell Wilson, although I think he played pretty well considering what he had to work with, which wasn't a whole hell of a lot. Because let's face it, the offensive line is absolute trash. There's so much talent on this offensive line, too. Untapped potential. You've got Broderick Jones, who we drafted last year, who people have been talking about, like, he did not play well this year at all. He's looked terrible this year. Now, he was hurt earlier on in the year. He did kind of play a little bit better towards the end of the year, but then he just went back to sucking the last month of the season. And people are talking about, well, he's not playing well because he's a left tackle, not a right tackle, which, yeah, I guess that there are positions and spots you're more comfortable with. Like when I played, I was better as like a right guard or a right tackle when I played than a left guard and a left tackle. I just felt more comfortable there. So that I understand, but there's two things I have to say about that excuse as to why Broderick Jones is not playing well. One, last year when he was the right tackle, he didn't do that bad. He did better last year than he did this year at right tackle. And two, he was drafted to be the left tackle. And he's been given every opportunity for 2 years to take that job from Dan Moore, and he's never been able to do it. If he showed any kind of inclination of being able to supplant Dan Moore Jr. from that left tackle position, they would have switched him a long time ago. They never did. And Dan Moore is no superstar. He's a free agent, pending free agent, and I doubt we're going to re-sign him. But that says a lot for a guy, Dan Moore, who has his moments where he can be really good, but he is very inconsistent. That says a lot more about Broderick Jones' ability to play left tackle in the league than it does Dan Moore. He has never been able to take that job from Dan Moore. Now, kudos to Dan Moore. He knew last year that they drafted a guy to replace him, and he's like, okay, if he's going to replace me, I'm going to make him earn it, and he has not earned it. That says a lot about Dan Moore's character. And there's some untapped potential there. Same thing with Roger Jones' untapped potential. Zach Frazier, people are hailing him as the next great center. And I mean, I guess he did better than the centers we've had since Pouncey retired, but not by much, honestly. But he's got potential. And Mason McCormick is another guy I think could be a diamond in the rough, but he needs some seasoning too. Obviously, you need good coaching. There's a lot of people think that if you're a pro, you shouldn't need coaching, and that's not true at all, especially in football. Coaching matters more in football than any other sport. You won't ever change my mind on that one. And like, one thing this team needs to do in the offseason, they need to revamp this coaching staff. The first thing they need to do, fire the offensive line coach. I don't even know who he is. I don't bother to learn his name because he sucks anyway. Fire his ass and just take a Brinks truck to Mike Munchak's house and leave it in his driveway. And I would pay him coordinator money to come back. And there's been talks that he may be willing to come back because he left us a few years ago to coach Denver because he said he wanted to be closer to his family who lived in Colorado. But that was also when a lot of the drama bullshit for this team with Antonio Brown and Le'Veon Bell and Ben Roethlisberger and all the toxic bullshit that this team had to deal with, that was caused by Mike Tomlin's inability to discipline and hold anybody accountable. That's just the truth. He left then because I think he got tired of the crap. He just wanted to coach some football. That's all he wanted to do. And I think he would be willing to come back. And as if I were the Rooneys, if I were Art Rooney and Omar Khan, I'm paying this cat coordinator money to come back and be the offensive line coach because Mike Munchak with these young players and Troy Faltanu, who I haven't even talked about yet, who knows what he's going to be. I mean, the fact that he's got hurt almost immediately and he didn't look good in the small sample size in the training camp in the preseason we saw of him, he did not look good, but he looked like a rookie. I'm not going to fault him for that. Yeah, dude looked like a rookie. Can he get better? Sure. Will he? That remains to be seen. But there's a lot of young talent, and imagine if a offensive line coach with the caliber and the resume of Mike Munchak, who, in my opinion, is the greatest offensive line coach in the history of football. That's my opinion. Pardon me. But you give Mike Munchak this group of clay, he's going to mold it into something beautiful. He's going to sculpt something amazing. And then if we get that offensive line to actually, give the quarterback, any quarterback, more than 1.6 seconds to throw the damn football and maybe open up some holes for the running game, we might actually be able to do something. Like Arthur Smith they brought him in because of the great running game and the great designs and stuff and what he did with Derrick Henry and what he did in Atlanta with those running backs. Yeah, I mean, they were good, but we don't have those kind of running backs. We don't have a Derrick Henry. We don't have a Tyler Algier or a Bijan Robinson. We have some talent at running back. The most talented running back on this team is Jaylen Warren. That's just my opinion. I mean, and Najee Harris has some talent, and honestly, Najee Harris. Now, just don't read too much into what I'm about to say here, but Najee Harris has the ability, the size, the strength, ability to almost be like a poor man's version of Derrick Henry. He's nowhere near what Derrick Henry is, but nobody is. Derrick Henry, dude, 6'3", 250 pounds. And when he breaks off these runs, he looks so damn slow. He looks like he's running in slow motion, but no one can catch him. It's amazing watching him run. No one's Derrick Henry. No one in the history of the NFL is Derrick Henry, in my opinion. Derrick Henry is like this generation's Jim Brown. That's a stud, but you can use Najee a lot of the ways you use Derrick Henry. But the problem with Najee Harris is he has some of the worst vision I've ever seen in a running back. It's Trent Richardson level bad. Because if you watch sometimes, there'll be a hole the size of a dump truck to one side, and he'll run clear to the other hole on the other side of the line and try to make something. He runs into a wall of players. And then other times when a hole may not develop, he'll stand there and just wait and dance around like he's Le'Veon Bell and tries to wait for something to form. Rather than just, use your size. You're about 230 pounds, man. You run like a wrecking ball. And when you run like that wrecking ball, you can be a very effective running back. But he never really does on a consistent basis. Yeah, he's had over 1,000 yards, but that's not impressive anymore. 1,000-yard receivers aren't impressive anymore. That's just not anything impressive to me anymore. It's not like it once was. 1,000 yards for a running back, that's standard. 20 years ago, yeah, sure, 1,000-yard rusher, pay the man. Not anymore. But Jaylen Warren, who I think he's a free agent too. I hope we re-sign him because I think Jaylen Warren is a very good receiver. He reminds me a lot of a Maurice Jones-Drew type, small in stature but runs like a little damn cannonball, man. And he's a tough runner. He's got really good vision. He is just a better playmaker, I think, than Najee Harris is. Excuse me, forgive me. Now, Najee Harris, I think, is gone. I think he's going to end up... I wouldn't be surprised if he ends up in Dallas or Tennessee next year. So, we have some cap space, and we have a lot of free agents we need to talk about. We need to think about re-signing. Jaylen Warren is one of them. And we need wide receivers. Like, wide receiver position is another position of issue with us. George Pickens is a guy who has a tremendous amount of potential and a lot of talent and ability. We see it. But once again, for some reason, there's no for some reason. People say for some reason this happens in Pittsburgh all the time. When you get a talented wide receiver with some maturity issues and you let that stuff manifest and build and build and build, and this is what you have. It happened with Antonio Brown. It happened even before Antonio Brown, with Santonio Holmes, it was starting to happen. It happened with Deontay Johnson, Chase Claypool, and even though you might disagree with me some, it happened with Juju. Now, Juju wasn't like on the level of a bad teammate like these other aforementioned running back or wide receivers are, but Juju, a lot of times, Juju seemed to care more about his social media clicks and his sweet dance moves than he did about winning games. Like, I don't know how many times we come out with the Tomlin special, come out in a game looking flat, unprepared, unmotivated, nobody wanted to be there, and then we'd score a touchdown in the second quarter to like cut our opponent's lead in half, and then Juju would lead a perfectly choreographed touchdown celebration. So, and for me that looks like, okay, so you didn't bother, coming out ready for this game, wanting to play and playing hard, trying to win, but you sure as hell nailed the choreography of the touchdown celebration, didn't you? And I got nothing against celebrating, but when you're playing like shit and you score a touchdown and you're still losing, no. Put the ball down and go back to the sideline, let's kick the extra point and be done with it. But that all comes back to Mike Tomlin. Because Mike Tomlin allows it. Because if you're a talented player, he allows this. See, there's no accountability. And there's no leadership on this team either. Cam Hayward, everybody thought Cam Hayward's a team leader. No, he's not. Because if Cam Hayward was an actual legitimate leader, a lot of this stuff would have been squashed real quick. Because a leader would have gone to some of these players and said, hey, you need to cut this out. And this is privately. Obviously in the locker room during practice and no cameras around. Tell him, you need to cut this out, start acting like a professional, or we're going to have a problem. And then if he wants to keep doing it, then that's when you got to go upside his head a little bit. Old school. But this team hasn't had any leadership for years. Since we lost guys like Hines Ward and Heath Miller, there hasn't been any leadership. And there was no leadership with Ben either. Because Ben, I know everybody loves Ben and everything. And yeah, he's a Hall of Famer. And Ben Roethlisberger is the man most responsible for any of the success the Steelers have had in the last 20 years. It's Roethlisberger. Roethlisberger is the main reason why Mike Tomlin is a Hall of Fame coach. And honest to God, he is the biggest reason why Bill Cowher made it to the Hall of Fame too. Because I love Bill Cowher. Miss Bill Cowher. Love the guy. But without that Super Bowl, I don't think he gets into the Hall of Fame. He was a hell of a coach, but that Super Bowl eluded him because he had a lot of great teams, but they could never find a great quarterback. And they finally had a great quarterback, won a Super Bowl. Cowher's in the Hall of Fame. A lot of that's because of Ben Roethlisberger. And all of Tomlin's success has been thanks to Ben Roethlisberger. Honest to God. Because let's face it, a lot of these receivers that were, supposed to be great receivers, they haven't really done a whole hell of a lot without Ben there. Let's be honest here. Deontay Johnson hasn't been anything without Ben Roethlisberger. You can argue Juju Smith-Schuster really hasn't been that much without Roethlisberger, although Juju, he wasn't anything without Antonio Brown taking all the attention because he can't get his own separation. But Chase Claypool, he was garbage after he left Pittsburgh. Antonio Brown had some good moments and stuff, but he wasn't really the player he was without Ben. So Ben deserves a lot of credit, whether you like the man personally or not. He's a big reason for the success this team has had over the last 20 years. It's sure as hell like Tomlin, because in the 2010s, you could say that Mike Tomlin did less with more than any coach in history. Like, how do you have guys like prime Ben Roethlisberger, prime Le'Veon Bell, and prime Antonio Brown? Those three alone, at one time, were like on their way to being first ballot Hall of Famers and all-time greats, especially Antonio Brown. Antonio Brown at one point was in the GOAT conversation with guys like Jerry Rice, and he was. But of course, egos get in the way, and then it all happens because there's no accountability on this team. Like, there's no discipline or accountability on this team. That's why players want to play there, because Tomlin wants to be their friend other than their coach, and you can't do that. I'm not saying you have to be a dick or anything like Nick Saban or Bill Belichick, but I mean, look at their success levels, and maybe there's something to that. But you have to discipline, and when someone gets out of line, you know what? You have to start suspending these players, taking their game checks, because when you start messing with their money, then that's when they'll start listening. And if if you know they're going to become a problem and you can't fix it, then get rid of them. Send them somewhere else and make them someone else's problem. Don't wait until the last minute, like they always do. And like I said, I don't think George Pickens is going to be on this team next year. He clearly, if you see how he's been behaving, especially the past month, quitting on routes, half-assing everything, pouting about everything, and then that press conference he did at the end of that playoff game, he doesn't want to be there anymore. Because he's got 1 year left on his rookie deal, and he's trying to parlay that into a huge contract, and he can't do that in Pittsburgh with that quarterback situation. And I don't know what they're going to do about the quarterback situation because, I think that they're going to end up bringing back Russell Wilson. I think that's the guy Tomlin wanted to play all along. Now, I don't know what Russell Wilson has left in the tank and how much it's going to cost because he's a free agent, and I think, minimum, because you have to overpay for a starting quarterback whether they're good or not. So I'm thinking minimum 3 years, $75 million minimum. Maybe all of it guaranteed or at least 60 of it guaranteed. Minimum $20-25 million a year. It's a lot of money. And if you decide to re-sign Justin Fields, who's a decade younger, it's going to cost you still another $20-25 million on a longer-term deal. That's a lot of money to invest in a quarterback that I don't think is going to get any better than he is right now. I don't think Justin Fields is that good. He's a good runner, and he's got a good, strong arm, but he is just horribly inaccurate with his throws. And I'm not sure if he's going to get any better. This is his fourth year in the league, and he hasn't really shown any improvement. And he's not going to show any improvement in Pittsburgh because there's no coaching there that can develop a young quarterback. And there's rumors about some mock drafts out there saying that, because we're the 25th pick right now, that maybe we could get a Jalen Milroe from Alabama. And there's two ways of thinking about this one. Now Jalen Milroe is basically a younger version of Justin Fields. Athletic guy, good runner, good arm, but not very accurate. Now, if you draft him, you have 5 years of control of him for a hell of a lot cheaper than you would have for Russell Wilson or Justin Fields. So that's one pro of drafting him. A con is we have a lot more holes than that to fill, and who knows what's going to happen. But you have at least 4 years of control of him before you have to worry. Well, actually 3 years before you have to worry about his fifth-year option and such. But he would come a lot cheaper, and he's a younger version of Justin Fields. So if you wanted to keep Justin Fields, maybe just try to draft Jalen Milroe. But I still think it's going to be Russell Wilson coming back and Justin Fields. So long. We'll see you in, I say he's going to Las Vegas because that's where he would have went if he had gone to Pittsburgh. He's not going to be the starting quarterback in Pittsburgh, and I really don't think he's going to be an effective starting quarterback anywhere. I don't see it, but I could be wrong about that. But yeah, the offensive deficiencies, it starts with the coaching staff. This whole coaching staff needs to be overhauled. Everybody except for Danny Smith, our special teams coach, needs to go on both sides of the ball. And the defense, it's terrible. Terrell Austin is one of the worst defensive coordinators I have ever seen. But you have to think about this. How much is this Terrell Austin's defense, and how much of it is Mike Tomlin's defense? Because I see a lot of the same issues with this defense as we did with Keith Butler when he was the defensive coordinator after they ran off Dick LeBeau. I see a lot of the same things, and that Tomlin's imprint on this defense is an issue too. So it's not all on Terrell Austin, but Terrell Austin has to go because they all got to go. But Mike Tomlin, see, people think Mike Tomlin is this defensive guru, and that's what his specialty is, which it isn't. Actually, Mike Tomlin's specialty is coaching wide receivers. He's a good wide receiver coach. He can find and develop wide receivers. That's one thing he's good at. That's his specialty, his wide receivers. That's it. Nothing else. Not quarterback, running back, not offensive line, not defense. Now, I know people look at his resume and think, yeah, this guy was a defensive backs coach for Tampa in the early 2000s, but you got to look at it this way. When he got there, I think it was 2000, 2001 he got there, dude was already, like, Tampa Bay's defense was already one of the best of all time, and that secondary had 2 Hall of Famers in it. I mean, it had Rondé Barber and John Lynch, 2 Hall of Famers already implanted on that secondary. And also had like guys like Dwight Smith and all those other dudes there. Jermaine Phillips, I believe. They were some talented defensive backs for that team. So that was a pretty gravy job for him. And then he goes to be spends 1 year after that as the defensive coordinator in Minnesota, where they were middle of the pack on defense. They were like 13th, 14th in the league. They were number 1 against the run, but dead last against the pass. And that put them right in the middle of the league. So this whole Mike Tomlin's this defensive guy, defensive guru, that narrative is just, you could shoot that hell out of that thing. So, but a lot of the coaching issues on this defense are a problem, but personnel is another issue. Like, this secondary is trash. It's just, you've got, first off, Minkah Fitzpatrick, I don't know what the hell happened to him, but when he's not making these splash plays that he made earlier in his career, he absolutely sucks. Minkah Fitzpatrick is terrible. I don't know how many times that I saw him when, like, every time our opponents would complete a long pass or something, Minkah's standing right there just watching it. And people were talking about the last few years. I actually questioned the last few years if Minkah Fitzpatrick is really as good as we thought. And everybody's talking about, well, we don't have anyone to cover. He has to stay up and play the run. He's out of position. He doesn't get to stay back and play center field like he's better at. Well, we got Deshaun Elliott this year, who was able to move up into the box and play the run, which Deshaun Elliott was actually pretty good this year. That was a pretty good free agent signing. I wouldn't put it up there with James Ferrier as the greatest of all time for the Steelers and free agent signings, but Deshaun Elliott was pretty good. And when he was injured, you saw a lot of the problems with this defense. But Minkah Fitzpatrick is just terrible. He was out of position all year, playing where he's supposed to be good at, playing basically what I call center field, that deep safety, covering both parts of the hash, taking care of that over-the-top stuff where he was supposed to be like a ball hawk who could just, create turnovers like crazy. And he had 1 interception this year. Didn't really do anything. And Joey Porter Jr., God bless him. There's talent there, but my God, someone needs to teach him how to play this position because he's good for 2 or 3 penalties a game. Now, if you're a defensive back and you get called for pass interference or holding, if you're doing that while trying to make a play every now and then, that can be forgivable, okay, because you're trying to make a play, and a lot of times you're going to make a big play. So coaches can forgive a penalty here and there if you're trying to make a play, but if you're getting these penalties because you're trying not to get burnt, there's a problem. Joey Porter Jr., man, there's clearly no one on this team who can teach him how to play this position. He needs some help. Like, he needs someone to help him, teach him how to play the position. Corey Trice, the same way. I think Corey Trice has a lot of talent, although he looked really bad in that last game when Terrell Austin and Tomlin left him on an island against Jamar Chase, which I don't care who you are. No one can cover Jamar Chase one-on-one. Prime Deion Sanders or Rod Woodson and Darrelle Revis cannot cover him one-on-one, in my opinion. So, that's a learning experience. And Corey Trice, I like him, but another problem with him is a stiff breeze will put him on IR. And Dante Jackson was okay at times this year, injury prone, and he's a free agent coming up too. So who knows if we're going to bring him in? I mean, we got more out of the trade than Carolina did, because we got him in a trade for Deontay Johnson. Excuse me. So we got more out of that trade, but still, he wasn't. If Joey Porter Jr. would have been what we thought he was going to be, that shutdown corner that can be left on an island with the best receiver and hold his own, a guy like Dante Jackson would have been good, or Corey Trice, because we can slide a safety over there to help a little bit over the top. But Joey Porter Jr. just needs some help. Someone needs to teach him how to play corner, because this isn't college. Okay, he got away with that in college because he was just bigger, stronger, and faster than the majority of the receivers he played. But now that's not happening in the big boy league, and he's gonna flag his ass right out of the league pretty soon, because he had a promising rookie year to he's about to be, if you want to call an early second rounder a bust, he's on his way to bust territory. And the secondary's in shambles. The linebacking core is meh. The inside linebackers. Dude, let's just call this what it is. Patrick Queen, we gave him a lot of money to bring an athleticism to that inside linebacking core that we haven't had since Ryan Shazier. And while he is a very athletic guy, he's very fast, my God, he misses so many tackles. He is a tackle-missing machine. When he's on, he is pretty damn good. But, buddy, when you watch him play, you can see why the Ravens were okay letting him go. Because he is a liability. Now, a linebacker is a liability in the passing game. I can understand that. But a linebacker cannot be a liability in the running game and expect to be an effective player in this league. So he's getting paid a shit ton of money to miss a lot of tackles. And Landon Roberts, I like Landon Roberts. He's played pretty well. He plays with some fire when he's in there. He's one of the few people who actually looks like he's trying half the time. So I'll give him that. But he's not a guy who can be an anchor for a defense. Peyton Wilson, that was a good sneaky draft pick. If he can stay healthy, I do think he's just all hustle. He's all hustle and all heart. And, you can be an effective player in the league with that. So I'm good with that. I am very okay with Peyton Wilson being a starter next season. Got no problem with that at all. And the outside linebackers, obviously we've got the big man, T.J. Watt, and I'm just going to get this out of the way right now. I won't wait for this one. T.J. Watt is 30 years old right now, and he's going into the last year of his contract. So next season, he'll be 31 and going into free agency after next year. And though on paper, T.J. Watt had a really good year, 11.5 sacks, 6 forced fumbles. That's a good year. But for T.J. Watt standards, that's a down year. That's the 11.5 sacks is the lowest amount of sacks he's had in a full season played since his second year when he had 13. A couple years ago, he had 5.5, but that's when he hurt his shoulder. He tore what he did. He tore the bicep, or he hurt his arm, and he missed most of the season. That doesn't count. 11.5 sacks, 6 forced fumbles is still great. And the last month of the season, he had 2 sacks against Philly, and he didn't record another sack the rest of the year. Now, I know people are going to come out here and say, hey, man, he's being double and triple teamed and held every play, which that is absolutely right. But tell me, how is that any different than any other year? Like last year, that happened, he had 19 sacks. A couple years ago, it happened. He had 22.5 sacks. T.J. Watt, he's slowing down. Because I saw a guy in T.J. Watt towards the end of the season that last month. I saw a guy who was old. I saw a guy who was hurting. And I saw a guy who was tired. So with that being said, the Steelers need to rebuild. I think they need to trade. I think they need to trade T.J. Watt. Because how much money is he going to command on the open market at 31 years old? He'll get a contract, but there are teams out there that will be willing to give up a lot of draft compensation if they feel like they are one pass rusher away from being a Super Bowl contender. Look what the Rams did a few years ago with Von Miller. They traded for Von Miller, give up a lot for Von Miller, won a Super Bowl, and then they just kind of let him go in free agency. They got what they wanted out of him. And I think right now, T.J. Watt is better than Von Miller was then. So any team that might be on the cusp of something, who could use that disruptive pass rushing force, I think they'd be willing to give up at least one first-round pick, maybe multiple first-round picks. But you could probably get a first. I bet you could probably, for T.J. Watt, for a team looking for that to get them over the hump, you could probably get a first and a third this year, and maybe a second or a third the following year if you trade him. Because, like I said, after this year, are we going to give him another contract? Who knows? We don't know. Because we've got guys, Nick Herbig, who I think looking like he's not quite ever going to be T.J. Watt, but I think he's going to be a star. We've got guys who can play that position. We've got some depth in that position. Nick Herbig will be he's the heir apparent to T.J. Maybe it's time to give him another shot. And Alex Highsmith on the other side, he's had some injury issues this year, but he's pretty damn good. Highsmith is pretty good, and boy, when he's healthy, he can be a disruptive force. So I think Herbig and Highsmith, they could pick up the slack for missing T.J. Watt and what we can get out of him. I say trade him. See, the only two, the biggest trading chips we have on this team to help the rebuild, because we need to rebuild. I know the adage is, the old saying is, the Steelers, they don't rebuild, they just reload. Steelers need to rebuild. That's it. That's all there is to it. And the two pieces we have that we can really get some draft picks to really start rebuilding and getting younger and getting some money off the books is trading T.J. Watt and trading Mike Tomlin. Now, Mike Tomlin's got a no-trade clause in his contract, which, got to give him credit. Him and his agent are slick on that, because Tomlin's smart enough to know that his bullshit won't work for any other team for more than a couple of years. The Steelers are not going to re-sign him. Or the Steelers, excuse me, they're not going to fire him. I'm sorry. They're not going to fire him. So he's going to be able to do what he wants there, and he has full control. So it's going to take one hell of a deal to get him to go. And I know that people are talking about, if Mike Tomlin became available, pretty much every coach in the league is in danger of getting fired. It's like, no. At one time, maybe. But after the last couple of years and after what you saw on Hard Knocks and how full of shit he is, that whole car salesman approach he has to this job, I say there's probably 4 or 5 teams lining that would be interested in getting him. And Chicago has already inquired about him. And they said that they're not going to trade him. Let's be honest, they're not going to trade Mike Tomlin, and Tomlin won't agree to a trade. So, we're just going to have to ride this out. So this team isn't going to be any good until Tomlin's gone. So none of this is going to happen. This is all just wishful thinking. But we have holes to fill. And we can get a lot of draft compensation for both of them. Maybe get a quarterback. Problem is, there's no quarterbacks in this draft that blow my skirt up. Shadur Sanders, Cam Ward, neither one of them are worth a shit in my book. If Shadur Sanders wasn't Deion Sanders' son, he wouldn't even be talked about before the 3rd or 4th round. He'd be a day 3 pick, guaranteed. And Cam Ward, he's meh. I see these guys as backups. So who knows? Quinn, and there's Quinn Ewers, is he coming out? Who knows? Some of these quarterbacks won't even come out. Like some mock drafts had us taking Carson Beck in the 2nd or 3rd rounds. He just transferred to Miami, so he's not coming back. That's one thing about the transfer portal with NCAA. It's bad all around, but one thing it's good for is a lot of students, a lot of student athletes and players, they're staying in college for the full duration because they're making pretty good money in college and they're superstars. Hell, that's 50-50. They're a bust in the NFL, and they're riding this wave of greatness right now in their little bubble, so a lot of players aren't very good. Of course, knowing Pittsburgh, they'd probably draft Drew Aller next year, and that'd probably make me want to, I don't know, bang my head off a wall. But we've got a lot of holes to fill. We need a quarterback, obviously, because Justin Fields, Russell Wilson, maybe Jalen Milroe in the draft. Those aren't options. I guess there's a chance they may bring in another veteran, Kirk Cousins. I don't know how much better that would be than Russell Wilson. You don't know, 'cause like I said, Kirk Cousins did not play well this year. But coming off that Achilles injury, I'm not 100% surprised he wasn't that good because he didn't have his lateral mobility. They say the second year after the injury is better. We see what happens. If we sign him, it's sort of like what we did with Russell Wilson. Because if Atlanta's going to try to trade him, but I don't know if anyone wants to take on that contract, they might just have to eat that money, a lot like Denver did. And so Pittsburgh could sign Kirk Cousins to a deal to a veteran minimum just like Russell Wilson and see what he's got left. Who knows? But still, that's not a long-term solution. So that's a big issue. But even if we draft a young guy, we don't have anyone who can develop him, so what's the point? So I don't know. Offensive line can use help. We need wide receiver help, which I'm not too concerned about that because one thing Tomlin is good at is finding wide receivers. I just wish he could find wide receivers who are good character guys and not immature jackasses. But, who knows what's in a person's heart, right? And maybe that Roman Wilson guy we took will develop next year because this year was basically a redshirt year for him. But that's a need. We got needs on defense. The defensive line, outside of Keanu Benton, how much juice does Cam Hayward have? And who knows if he'll even come back? Hell, a lot of people said they should trade him along with T.J. Watt so they can have a chance to go win a Super Bowl elsewhere. And I wouldn't argue with that. And Cam Hayward, even though he's 35, 36 years old, he could fetch a good price too because he's still pretty damn good. But, we got to think about life after him because Loudermilk ain't it. Ogunjobi ain't it. Dean Lowry, all these guys, they're not it. Keanu Benton is a star. I like Keanu Benton. He's great, but we need some serious depth at that. And honestly, I think Keanu Benton, he's been playing that nose tackle, that zero technique on our defense, which he's good at, but I think he would actually be better as the defensive end in this system, playing that 5 technique, and we draft a true nose tackle. Because we haven't had a true nose tackle since Casey Hampton. Javon Hargrave was really good, but he wasn't a true nose tackle. And hopefully, when Keanu Benton's contract's up, we won't lose him like we did with Javon Hargrave because he's pretty damn good too, and I miss that guy. But yeah, we got holes in the secondary we need to fill, especially with, I mean, I don't know. I don't know if anyone would trade for Minkah Fitzpatrick, but I think we need to let Minkah go. Maybe trade him too. Because any value he may have is running out quickly. He doesn't have the value he would have had last year in the trade market. That's another guy you might be able to get some draft picks for. Who knows? But we need some cornerback help. We need safety help. We need linebacker help because I'm not 100% sold on Patrick Queen anymore. I like the signing when I was excited about it first because that does, like I said, brings the athleticism of that position we have not had since Ryan Shazier. But my God, man, I don't care how good of an athlete you are. If you miss so many tackles, and he misses them bad, but this is all for doesn't matter what we do in free agency, in the draft. If Mike Tomlin is the coach of this team going forward, it's going to be the same thing as ever. Because that's all the media cares about. All the team seems to care about, and the players and all this stuff care about, is this getting Tomlin his non-losing season. Once they hit that 9-win mark, just put it on cruise control. And if we make the playoffs, we're a playoff team again. We're going to go one and done. I mean, Mike Tomlin, in his 18 years as a coach, has made the playoffs 12 times. 8 of those years, he's been one and done. And yes, he's riding a Super Bowl win that he had 17 years ago. And he did that with mostly Bill Cowher's team. Remember that. Mike Tomlin didn't build anything with this team. He inherited a championship team full of Pro Bowl players and Hall of Famers, and he got one Super Bowl out of them and 2 Super Bowl appearances. But when he was able to put his stamp on this team, it's gotten progressively worse every year. That's something to be said about his ability to both, outside of, with the exception of the wide receiver position, find good players and develop good players. Because they can't do that, especially the quarterback. They cannot develop a young quarterback. Kenny Pickett sucks, but their inability to develop anyone, that didn't help anything. And like prime Tom Brady would not help this team right now because there's so many holes with it. What is that? We have so many holes to fill, and Tomlin, I don't think, is the guy to get this team over the hump. I don't know who it could be. I mean, if you want to bring him in, and it's like I said, I would hire, honestly, if they got rid of Tomlin, the first call I make is to Brian Flores, because he was pretty damn good as a Dolphins coach with a shitty roster. And one thing he'll do is he can really coach some defense. He'll get this defense whipped into shape. And also, even though their season ended kind of abruptly and kind of poorly, he can get a lot of those young coaches from the Minnesota staff to come with him, and they might implement an offense that's more state-of-the-art. And like I said, get us out of the 80s, at least get us into the mid-2000s. Because this stuff isn't working. It's just not working. It hasn't worked for a while, and it's getting worse. And Mike Tomlin, it's only a matter of time. And when he gets his first losing season, I guarantee you he'll resign. Or he'll agree to a trade or something. He'll leave when he gets a losing season. But, like I said, with the recent years and the failures and late in the season collapses and Hard Knocks, there's a lot more people who are starting to see through Tomlin's bullshit. So it's going to be an interesting offseason, but I don't think anything's going to change because they're not going to fire him, and he's not going to agree to a trade because whatever team trades for him will fire him in 2 years because he's not going to be effective. But we'll see what happens, and like I said, I appreciate y'all for listening to me rant and ramble again. If you got opinions on it, hit me up in the comment section and let me know what you think. But I appreciate you listening. I hope you all have a good day. I will see you next time.